Occupy Democrats Network, and thank you so much for joining us on what is a very, very busy news day today. If you've been living under a rock and you don't know what's been going on, well, let me fill you in. It has something to do with the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and the Colorado Supreme Court has ruled 4-3 that Donald Trump will not be on the ballot, at least as of right now, for the 2024 presidential election. Now, look, this is going to go to the Supreme Court, right? They're going to be the ultimate force when it comes to Donald Trump being on this ballot or not. But I'm going to tell you right now, if the Supreme Court rules the same way as the Colorado Supreme Court ruled, this is going to be happening in other parts of the country. This is a very, very big deal. And I thought it was a really good, eloquent article that I'm going to read for you with some reasons why they made the right decision, an opinion piece. Before I do that, let me just tell you the guests we're going to have here coming up in about 5 to 10 minutes or so. Former presidential candidate and former congressman out of Chicago, Joe Walsh, is going to be joining us. As you know, Joe Walsh is not a Donald Trump supporter. At one point in his life, he was. Not anymore, but he doesn't like this ruling. So I want to pick his brain and get his thoughts because I respect his opinion. And then on the other side of this issue, we're going to be joined by Grant Stern from Occupy Democrats. So I'm going to let those two kind of dive deep into this issue because, boy, you could really dive deep into this. There's a lot to get to. And I hope I'm not butchering this guy's name here, but a really good article on Occupy that you can check out. His name is Jason McKeoch. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, right? He made a couple of really good points, really good article. He said the district court did not abuse its discretion in admitting portions of Congress's January report into the evidence at trial. I'm going to get into that. And they concluded that the events at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th constituted an insurrection. And they concluded that the President Trump engaged in that insurrection through his personal actions. And there's many more things you can talk about in this article, but I'm just kind of going to break this down and give you my opinion. First of all, January 6th doesn't happen if not for Donald Trump and his behavior and his actions. Before January 6th even started, for months, he said the election was stolen, that Joe Biden cheated, that the Democrats cheated. Now, you are entitled to your opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You can't just throw things at a wall and hope it sticks. Donald Trump knew there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud. He lied. He continues to lie to this very day. January 6th does not happen if Donald Trump doesn't lie about the 2020 election. But it gets much deeper than that. Because that day, when the violence had already started, Donald Trump went on Twitter and said Mike Pence needs to do the right thing. He was pressuring Mike Pence into attempting to overturn the outcome of a free and fair election. What does that mean? It means he wanted this insurrection to happen. Oh, and it doesn't end there. He sat on his fat ass for almost 5 hours in the White House, and he did nothing. Literally nothing except watching on television. How do we know this? Well, first of all, there were no tweets and no videos and no statements that were put out to stop the violence until hours later. And we also know this from witnesses who testified under oath that that's exactly what he was doing. I know we're going to hear more from Mark Meadows on this as well. Hutchinson already testified. So we know a number of things here. January 6th doesn't happen if not for Donald Trump lying about the 2020 election. You don't have to say, I want all of you to storm the Capitol and defecate on Nancy Pelosi's desk and attack police officers in order for it to be incitement. We know that January 6th doesn't happen without Donald Trump's actions. And look at the actions or lack thereof on that day after the violence had already started. You heard chants of hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence. And while all this stuff is going on, Donald Trump is still trying to pressure the vice president at that time to overturn the outcome of the election. Authority that he did not have. It's one of the few things where I agree with Mike Pence in doing the right thing because he did do the right thing. So anybody out there that wants to make the claim that Donald Trump didn't incite, that Donald Trump had nothing to do with what took place on January 6th, that it wasn't his fault, that he didn't want it to happen, guess what? You can't spell the word fact because based on his action or inaction months before and on that day, the facts speak for themselves. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that he has to be convicted of insurrection in order for a Supreme Court in Colorado to make this decision. I want to be very clear on that as well. Listen, if I had it my way, Donald Trump would be off the ballot across the country. He's a criminal. He's going to be a convicted felon. He's facing 91 felony counts. Yes, I get it. Innocent until proven guilty. I understand that. Donald Trump and his attorneys are the ones that are going to have to prove he's innocent, not me. He's facing 91 felony counts. Call me crazy, but I don't want somebody running for president that's a convicted felon. I guarantee you Donald Trump is eventually going to be a convicted felon. So you add that all together, and that has nothing to do with what took place yesterday in Colorado. It has to do with what took place on January 6th. Now, if you're still one of those people that says Donald Trump didn't incite and he had nothing, to do with those people that stormed the Capitol and committed those heinous acts, then I want to ask you this question, and it's a very simple one. If Donald Trump doesn't lie months before January 6th, if he doesn't say the election was stolen, if he doesn't say Joe Biden cheated, if he doesn't say the Democrats cheated, does January 6th happen? Yes or no? Now, I'd like to think if you have any logic at all, the answer would be no. January 6th does not happen if not for Donald Trump's words, his lies, his rhetoric. It does not happen. So, some people might use this, like Donald Trump. They might use it and might use it as a positive for Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump used his mugshot, and now he's using it to sell trader cards and make money. So, he's going to use this to rev up his base. He's going to use it to play victim. He's going to use it, like he does everything else, to try to make money and raise money and get votes. There isn't going to be a civil war, so we can stop that nonsense. The Supreme Court ultimately is going to make the decision. But I'm giving you my opinion. I have no problem with this decision because I remember that day. I was live on the radio that day. I remember what took place on January 6th. Over 140 officers beaten. People died that day. It was an embarrassing day for the country, and I'll never forget that day. And I've blamed partially Donald Trump for the events and what took place that day, and I will continue to do it today. If Hillary Clinton was president of the United States, January 6th does not happen. And it is interesting, isn't it, that people want to make the claim that Hillary Clinton is an election denier. No, she's not. Hillary Clinton is not an election denier. She conceded the election the following morning. This is going to go to the Supreme Court. Colorado has already made their decision. There's a lot of people on both ends of the spectrum, even those that are anti-Trump, some of whom don't like this decision. And then on the other side of the aisle, there are people that feel a different way, whether you're Republican or you're Democrat. So this is going to be a very interesting time here. And the next 8 weeks or so are also going to be very, very interesting because the Supreme Court's going to have to make a decision. They're going to have to make it very fast. This is going to have to be a very quick decision. And let's keep in mind, in Colorado, it wasn't like the vote was 7-0 either. The vote on the Colorado Supreme Court was 4-3. So with that being said, we're going to have to wait and see how this thing goes. We're going to have to wait and see how this all plays out. We know that Donald Trump is going to take this as a positive, not a negative. He's going to campaign off of it. He's going to call himself the victim. He's going to blame the Democrats for everything. This is what Donald Trump does, and this is what he will continue to do. And we're just going to have to see, again, how this thing plays out and where it goes. I've given you my opinion. I don't have a problem with the decision. You don't have to be convicted of insurrection in order for the Supreme Court to make this kind of decision, which they did. At the same time, I disagree. I think that Donald Trump should have been charged with inciting an insurrection. I think the evidence is overwhelming that he incited this insurrection, and he continues to lie about the 2020 election. But it is what it is. And so we're going to have a couple guests lined up for you here in this hour. I know Grant Stern from Occupy Democrats is going to be joining us here in just a few minutes, but I want to bring this guy on right now because former presidential candidate, friend of the show, one of my favorite guests. I always love having him on. At one point, he did support Donald Trump, not anymore. Also a former congressman out of Chicago. Glad to have my friend Joe Walsh right now on the line. Joe, appreciate you coming on, my friend. How are you?
Brian, nothing to talk about, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about these days. And I have to start off the conversation by apologizing to you. I was texting you yesterday while you were on CNN. So my apologies for that.
I should have given you a shout out.
That would have been nice. I appreciate that. People, who the hell is that guy? But so Joe, let me start here. I know you're just as much anti-Trump as I am. I appreciate that. But you don't really like this decision. Tell me why.
And I apologize, Brian, because I go back and forth. I'm conflicted. Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. Of that, there is no doubt. He tried to overthrow an election. There's no doubt. He attacked the Constitution. He is a traitor. Of all of that, there is no doubt. Now, unlike you have to be a certain age or your citizenship to be president of the United States, Amendment 14, Section 3, insurrection, rebellion. Okay, it's not quite as clear cut. So one state court in America has determined he's not eligible because he committed an insurrection. I'm conflicted on the ruling. I respect the ruling because we've got to respect the courts. It'll go to the Supreme Court within a week, I think. And however the Supreme Court comes down, I'll respect. Brian, last thing I'll say, Brian, is I'm conflicted because I worry about the country. Mm-hmm. I want Trump and Trumpism to be freaking wiped out. The most powerful way to do that is to kick their ass at the ballot box. And I don't want to give him a damn thing besides a licking next year. So I'm conflicted.
So let me ask you this. If the Supreme Court does rule in favor of him being off the ballot, and I don't know if that's going to happen or not, I'd actually be a little surprised if they did. But if it does happen, do you see now this happening in other states across the country?
Yes. Hold on a minute, Brian. Don't move. Max, no. For the record, I just yelled at my chocolate lab who was sticking his nose in the bag of dog food. Max, no. Hey, Grant.
Hey, how's it going, Joe?
Oh, I have no doubt if the Supreme Court affirms this ruling, I think a number of states will follow suit, and away we go.
Also joining us in this conversation is Grant Stern from Occupy Democrats. Okay, Grant, so Joe Walsh just said he's a little conflicted on this, but he's going to respect the decision, which I think we all should. What do you say, Grant?
You know what? I think it's a great decision for America because it's happening before the election instead of afterwards. And it's giving the Supreme Court a chance to weigh in before there's criminal trials, before there's primaries, before there's elections, right? This is something that I've heard as a complaint time and time again. And the fact is that it needs to be decided. I mean, it's been 3 years. We all saw this in front of our eyes. It needs to, finally like hit a courtroom and be done instead of an endless debate over something that we all saw happen with our own two eyes. We watched it on live television. We've seen the replay. We've seen the sworn testimony. We've seen the text messages. We've seen the text messages that got deleted. It was an insurrection, people. There's people sitting in jail today for seditious conspiracies against the government to try and stop the government from certifying Joe Biden's win. And there's a lot of people that say, well, let's let the voters decide. And I think that's a great idea, right? The problem is that when the voters decided in 2020 who won the election, one of the people decided, I don't feel like losing. And you can't just say, let's let the voters decide when the voters decided and someone doesn't listen to that decision.
Joe, what do you say to that?
Two responses to my friend Grant. I think maybe he agrees with me on this. I wish that the criminal trial of Trump in January 6th had happened a hell of a long time ago.
Oh, I agree.
A year ago. I wish we had the answer. He did commit and engage in insurrection. And I wish we had a jury of his peers by now who would have determined that. Look, Donald Trump is an existential threat to our democracy. But I don't want to abandon democracy to beat him. If a court rules as a court's going to rule, then fine.
Yeah,
That's our
democracy.
system at work. That is our system at work. But
Yes.
if Grant, last thing I'll say, if the Supreme Court overrules this ruling, then that's our democracy at work too, and we all got to accept it and move on.
Absolutely. There's, when you go to the courts, you commit to the courts deciding things, and that's just how it is. I've gotten court rulings that not only do I vehemently disagree with and know for a fact are wrong, but they're horribly wrong. But I abide it because, it is what it is. I don't say, well, like when it's something that's not a matter of law. Matters of law, we can all have a disagreement about. But then, what do? You challenge it. I mean, that's what I do.
But Grant, I think Joe makes a good point here, and I understand what he's worried about. What's going to happen in this country? Violence. I'm worried about that as well. Does that bother you at all? Because it certainly bothers me, and I know it bothers Joe.
So, I share those concerns that there are those people who will interpret a court ruling as not being democracy, right? Because those are the same people that say that America is not a democracy, it's a republic, and they don't understand that we're a Republican democracy. And, that's the system we set up, that people represent others, right? We're not a direct democracy. But yeah, I am concerned that there are people that are going to take this as a call to the wrong things. However, what we saw on January 6th was so much worse. It tells me that if we let it go on longer, right, and then it becomes the same exact issue, Donald Trump loses again. He's never won a popular vote in this country. He loses again, and then he doesn't respect the results again. And then you have the government, instead of the person at the center of the government leaving everything to, lax and, saying that we should, it was all the vice president's fault and all that. Instead, you have Joe Biden, who's going to say, okay, I'm going to call the troops out to make sure that there's a vote count that's not disrupted. And what happens? Then they amplify those calls. So I feel like the longer you let it all sit, the longer it's all going to be amplified. What if Congress doesn't, what if Congress doesn't want to seat him because of the qualification issue, and it's not through a court? Then they're going to say it's political. It's whatever it is that's against them. They're just going to say that it's bad because it's against them.
Joe,
there's a reason.
Sure. But Joe, what would you say to the MAGA Republicans out there on Fox News, OAN, Newsmax, to name a few, that are pretty much all saying this is because the Democrats, they're afraid of Donald Trump. They don't want him on the ticket because he's the guy that's going to defeat Joe Biden. What do you say to those people?
Well, just one point, Brian. It's wrong. Obviously, that's all bull crap, and it's wrong. And to Grant's point, Trump's superpower is he's so bad and so evil that every day there are 100 bad, evil things he does. And so it's hard to nail him down to one. And Grant's right. We should never let look, if Trump's convicted by Jack Smith, that's going to lead to violence. If he's convicted because of what he did down at Mar-a-Lago with the classified docs, that will lead to violence. The threat of violence should never stop us from pursuing justice. All I'm saying is the country has to gird for it.
Yeah.
This Colorado ruling is a little bit different. It's a little bit interpretive. The legal community is not completely unified behind this. All judges are not unified behind this. So I just think if you're going to kick him off the ballot, man, it's got to be really as clear cut as it can be.
But that's just think about the Bush versus Gore decision. Was that as clear cut as it could be? It was 5-4, and the guy who cast the deciding vote was appointed by the father of the candidate. It was not clear cut.
Well, I would argue, Grant, that probably wasn't good for the country, but continue.
And I wouldn't disagree with you. And I live here in Miami-Dade, where something called the Brooks Brothers riot happened, where they were counting the votes, and then the threat of mob violence inside the hallways of the counting facility caused Miami-Dade County's mayor to stop the vote. And the rest is legal history and history. But, I want to say this about yesterday's decision and what caused it. Okay. What caused it was Donald Trump's legal strategy of running for president to try and avoid liability for January 6th and for the criminal acts that he's taken. Right. So if it wasn't for him running for office, none of this would be decided right now. I want you to think about that. They're going to decide, did he engage in an insurrection? Right? They're going to decide, what it was. Is he still culpable? They're going to decide the Brandenburg test, which is, when does speech cross the line past the First Amendment's protections into incitement of violence? Right? There's all of these issues that are happening in a lot of cases with Donald Trump. I think there's 3 or 4 civil lawsuits that were all consolidated into the DC appeals court decision that happened a couple of weeks ago on presidential immunity and the limits of presidential immunity in a civil case, right?
Right.
And there's so all of this stuff that's being decided would never have been decided right now had Donald Trump not run for president. Okay. Sure. So now running for president is forcing the legal process to move years faster than it would have. Yeah, and I feel like it's going to backfire all of it.
I agree. Joe, I want to ask you this, because you used the term clear cut. Is it clear cut? I mean, Donald Trump before January 6th lied about the election. He continues to lie about it today. And then I think more important is his behavior that day. We know that he was sitting on his ass for 4 hours. He did absolutely nothing, when basically he was being begged by members of his administration to call out the violence. And he refused to do so. While the violence is going on, he was still trying to convince Mike Pence to overturn the outcome of a free and fair election. To me, that's clear cut.
Brian, you had me at hello, my friend. No, that's clear cut. The fact that Trump incited, led, and participated in insurrection, that's clear cut. Completely. He committed insurrection. When I say clear cut, I think it would be helpful if legally it was clear cut. I know he did, but who the hell am I? Former one-term congressman, big whoop. Other judges have ruled different things on this. It was a 4-3 decision. All 7 Colorado Supreme Court judges appointed by Democrats. I think it would be better if things were more unanimous on such an important ruling like this. That's all.
Let me ask both of you this question. Grant, I'll start with you. What's going to be the outcome here? How is the Supreme Court going to rule on this? What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks for asking. I think that, unfortunately, this is not going to be as clear cut as we want. I think that in the Supreme Court, there's a strong chance that there could be a 9-0 decision. Okay. But there's an equally strong chance that we could see a 7-2 or even a 5-4 decision. And I'll explain my reasoning. Okay. So let's start with something really important that I noticed right away in my first read of this decision, which is that the court relied on a decision by Neil Gorsuch deciding a Colorado state law case called Hassan with someone who is not a natural born citizen and affirming him being removed from the ballot because he was not qualified, right? So the court, they did this with an eye towards SCOTUS reviewing it clearly, when they said, hey, then Judge Gorsuch ruled exactly how we ruled. Mm-hmm. That is, I've done that in some of my cases. If you have an idea who the judge might be, you want to write the decision towards them. So there's one vote that is certainly going to be persuadable. It's going to be very difficult to get a judge that Donald Trump appointed to then compromise his apparent integrity. And I'm not saying that Gorsuch is compromised or anything like that. He's written some very, decisions that you wouldn't expect from him that are, very not partisan, and that's good. But it's going to be very difficult to get a judge to go back on his opinion when it's been cited by the lower court, right? And then Roberts, I think, is another vote who is probably going to be on the side of disqualification, just based on his past votes, based on the fact that he's suddenly become the moderate center of this court, even though he's extremely conservative by any, objective measure. But relatively speaking, he's, trending towards the liberal wing a bit. So, I mean, you've got the 5 votes that you could possibly have. Then you have the next 2, Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh is the most partisan person to ever sit on our Supreme Court, but he might, he doesn't have to make a Republicans versus Democrats ruling. He's broken that mold in the past. And then you have Alito and Thomas, and those guys are kind of like living their best lives, even when they shouldn't be. And they could do anything. But I just think that leaning on Gorsuch so heavily, if you get Gorsuch, you're going to get at least one more of the conservative 6. I 100%. There are most, he's basically the only judges to the right of Gorsuch are Thomas and Alito.
All right, Joe, what say you?
I think there's going to be pressure for it to be unanimous or close to unanimous. I'm expecting a 9-0 ruling overruling Colorado.
Wow.
I'd love to be pleasantly surprised with a 9-0 ruling affirming, but I expect the Supreme Court to shoot this down 9-0.
Wow. I mean, that and you expect this probably
on what grounds, though? What grounds do you think they're going to shoot it down on?
I think, Grant, if I had to guess, they'll make up some procedural thing. They will not rule on the substance of, if I had to guess.
I mean, I didn't get to read all of the. Yeah, no, I didn't get to read all of the dissents, but the one that struck me the most was the one that said that the third, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, this judge argued that was not self-effective or what's the term they use? I'm blanking here on it. Self-executing. Okay. So I think that's going to be the big legal question. Like, if there's going to be a dividing line on the law versus the facts. But, when the Colorado court reviewed everything, they're not the finder of fact. The lower court judge was the finder of fact in this case. And so the Supreme Court isn't going to really reverse the findings of fact either. This is what I'm kind of getting at. Like, I don't think they're very deferential to lower courts when it comes to findings of fact. Like, they're there to review the factual record and see if it supports it, see if there's a clear error. And I would challenge anybody. I don't even think Clarence Thomas or Alito would say that there's some sort of clear error in the finding that Donald Trump is an insurrectionist. Do you agree with me on that, Joe?
Oh, look, I think, I agree with you on substance, but I think Alito, Thomas, they could and will find anything to rule as they want to rule. The only other point I'd make is, I know a lot of people disagree with the Colorado ruling. I'm conflicted on it, but I get angry at people that say, "Oh, it's just 7 Democrats. It's all political." Bull crap. But the same thing with the Supreme Court. You may not like the makeup of this Supreme Court, but if they rule as they rule, let's not all just attack them and say it's purely political.
I tend to side a little bit with Joe on this one, in that, even though I agree with what you're saying, Grant, I just think some of these people are so partisan. I can't imagine Clarence Thomas voting in favor of this. I just can't. Am I wrong in thinking that? I just think there's a few on the Supreme Court where you're not going to change their mind no matter what, and they're just not going to do anything to harm Donald Trump. That's just how I feel. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking that way.
Clarence Thomas doesn't owe anything to Donald Trump. Not one thing. Okay. And let's not forget who brought this challenge to the court in Colorado. It was Republicans. Mm-hmm. Okay. It wasn't Democrats.
Yeah, true, Grant. But it was Republicans. And again, you know where I am on Trump. It was Republicans who were no fans of Donald Trump. And that was smart of them to come forward with it.
Every year that there's a presidential election, there's challenges like this. People challenge Barack Obama.
I got no
People
problem
challenge Ted Cruz. Right. Ted Cruz, his nomination was challenged.
I got no problem with the challenge. I agree.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, the issue is, and this is something that just, I'm in Miami, right? And this actually just came up in a local election, right? So there's a big challenge and went to the appeals court, and the appeals court ruled in favor of against the city of Miami trying to exclude somebody, right? And they issued their final ruling, and they said, despite the fact that you guys were all arguing about this, well, the actual language of it says that, and you guys are all wrong. And whether you think that's a good idea or a bad idea, this is simply what's written, and we're judges, and we're here to tell you what's written really means. And that can happen. I have seen that kind of legal writing come from him. He's capable of it.
Hey, Brian,
I don't disagree. Yeah.
I was just going to say one quick final word from me.
Yep.
I think all three of us agree on this. We're here because Donald Trump is a coward and a traitor. He was not big enough. He was not brave enough. He was not patriotic enough to do something as simple as accept an election loss. That is the only reason we're going through all of this.
Yep.
I don't disagree with you, Joe, one bit. We all side, on truth here, and you're absolutely right. Well, Joe Walsh and Grant, always appreciate both of you joining me on the show too.
Good seeing you, Grant. You rock, baby.
Good to see you too, Joe.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Man.
Joe, have a great Christmas, and you and your family, and always love watching you on CNN, but I'll try not to text you.
Hey, by the way, Brian and Grant,
yeah,
none of this happy holidays crap. Merry Christmas to both of you.
Thank
Christmas.
You.
Merry Christmas to you too, and Merry Christmas to the Dolphins, because Christmas Eve is going to be lit.
Yeah, it'll be lit.
Right.
It'll be lit. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Joe Walsh, Grant Stern. I appreciate both of you very much. Grant, good to see you as well, and we'll see how this thing plays out. Right?
You got it, man. Have a great show. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Grant. Always a pleasure, my friend. Grant Stern with Occupy Democrats. Also to note, I'm so happy to be a part of the Occupy Democrats network. Grant and the guys over there do such a wonderful job, and always a pleasure. And gosh, Joe's been doing my show for years. It's funny. The first time Joe Walsh did my show, he was still on the fence when it came to Donald Trump. Boy, has he changed since then. Here's what I want to do. This is a very complicated subject to some people, right? And I want to open up the phone lines. People are going to agree. People are going to disagree. Grant and Joe don't agree on everything. That's why I wanted them both on. But we all agree, for the most part, that Donald Trump is a danger to our democracy, and he probably incited the insurrection, right? But I want to open up the phone lines now because, the reason why I say this is an interactive show. You agree, you disagree. The argument from the right, the Democrats just are afraid of Donald Trump and they don't want him to be on the ballot, and he did not incite an insurrection. The argument from the left, Donald Trump absolutely incited the insurrection. It doesn't happen without his calling and lies about the 2020 election. So I'm going to open up the phone lines now. You heard from former presidential candidate Joe Walsh. You heard from Grant Stern with Occupy Democrats. Now I want to hear from you. 702-221-7283. My doors are open. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. I don't care whether you're a Trump supporter. I don't care whether you're a Biden supporter. What do you think about this ruling in Colorado? What do you think about the Colorado Supreme Court saying 4-3, Trump's off the ballot? What do you think our Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. should do? Are you in favor of this ruling, or are you against this ruling? Now is your chance to sound off. And I don't care whether you're watching on Facebook, the Occupy Democrats Network, if you're watching on TikTok or YouTube, any social media platform, or on the FM AM dial. Now's the time. I want you to call in. 702-221-SAVE. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. We'll take a break. We'll take your phone calls on the other side. It's Pushing the Limits. All right, welcome back. It is Pushing the Limits on a Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking about obviously the Supreme Court decision in Colorado. 4-3 vote. Donald Trump off the ballot. It's going to go to the Supreme Court in Washington, and we'll have to see what happens. We just heard from former presidential candidate and former Congressman Joe Walsh. He signed off. He's kind of on the fence on this. Grant Stern from Occupy Democrats on my side when it comes to Donald Trump being put off the ballot. And now it's a chance for you guys to sound off. The number to call is 702-221-7283. Again, that number, 702-221-SAVE. Let's start off with Dwayne. Dwayne is first up on Pushing Limits. What's up, Dwayne?
A lot. I do believe anybody involved in January 6th broke the law. You deserve what you get. The fact about the Colorado Supreme Court, they open up a can of worms, I believe. The fact that they took him off the ballot, the diehard Democrats are going to be like, yeah, he's going to be illegitimate, and if he wins, he's not our president. Okay, it goes to the Supreme Court, and if it's down the line, Republican and Democrat, that they say that, it gives both sides the right to say, whoever wins, you're not my president, and there's going to be riots in the streets.
Well,
I just,
okay,
I
hear
don't,
you.
I don't think it's not going to go well for the country.
I agree with you. I agree with you. It's not going to go well for the country. I'm a registered independent. I lean to the left on social issues. I am anti-Donald Trump. But I agree with you. It's not going to go good for the country. But I can tell you January 6th didn't go very well for the country either. Now, do I think Donald Trump is illegitimate? Absolutely. Based on, his behaviors, the things he's done, I do believe he's going to be a felon. He's facing 91 felony counts. But I also understand your point. This is not good for the country either. It's an embarrassment. But why is it bad for the country? Well, I believe it's bad for the country based on Donald Trump's actions before January 6th, lying about the election, right? I mean, would you agree with me that Joe Biden won a free and fair election?
I can't. I'm not going to say that there was fraud, that people went out and voted like they weren't supposed to.
But there's fraud in every election.
My thing is about that.
Yeah.
My thing about the election was that the mainstream media, all media, held back things from both sides to keep people out of the know.
Well, give me an example on the left.
Unless you were looking.
Well, give me an example. I agree with you. Fox News, the Dominion voting machines, and right-wing publications.
Right.
Give me an example.
I
of
agree
the
with
left.
that.
Yeah, sure, but give me an example of the left that they just put forth all this misinformation about the election. Like, can you give me an example? Because I can't think of one.
Well, just hiding stuff. Period.
What? Tell me.
Like
I know.
Laptop.
I want to hear you out on that.
Whether or not the laptop was right or wrong, they hid it.
When you say they,
you're just.
When you say they, what
the
do you
media,
mean?
The media.
But CNN and MS.
They just basically, yeah.
But CNN.
And then after it's all said and done, then they come out and said, yeah, it's real.
Well, hold on a second.
What?
Nobody that I recall ever said there is no laptop. The question was, what is on the laptop that would mean that Hunter Biden committed crimes? By the way, Hunter Biden had nothing to do with the election. He's always been a private citizen. We can agree on that. As far as hiding stuff, I heard from day one, Hunter Biden, not a great guy, drug addictions, prostitutes, took advantage of his last name. There's no question about that, right, Dwayne? But I don't think that the left or left entities went above and beyond trying to hide things like Republicans do, or at least Fox News, OAN, or Newsmax.
I think it was both ways.
I just don't think
so. It really seemed like it was both ways.
I respectfully disagree with you. I think when it comes to the 2020 election, we still have right-wing entities that lie. We saw the Dominion. If that was the case, from what you were saying, then why wasn't CNN or MSNBC sued for $900 million? It was Fox News that was sued for blatant lies. In this country, if you do that and you defame and you lie, you're going to get sued. I haven't seen any left-wing publications when it came to the election that were sued.
I know the truth, but I'm not going to say it.
Okay.
Did I lie? Well, I guess not. So how are you going to sue them for not reporting on it?
But CNN and MSNBC,
because they didn't.
But CNN and MSNBC and those entities on the left that you're talking about never had access to Hunter Biden's laptop. If you listen to people on the right, many of them act like they're part of the DOJ and they know everything in that laptop. Here's what we know. Hunter Biden has been indicted. There's a gun charge in there and some other charges. If he's guilty, fine. Hold him to the highest extent of the law. But here's the difference. Donald Trump is the former president. He's the face of the Republican Party. Hunter Biden is a private citizen, and there's zero evidence that Joe Biden committed any crimes. I just think they're two different topics. That's all I'm saying.
Evidence and proof and there's evidence, proof. Has it evolved into proof yet? No.
I haven't seen any evidence. I haven't But Dwayne, I haven't seen anything that would show me that Joe Biden committed any crimes. Nothing. They call them the Biden crime family. Then what about, if you're going to talk about Hunter Biden and you don't like using his father to make money, then why does nobody talk about Jared Kushner on the right? Why does nobody talk about?
I hope they investigate him and throw him in jail if they done something wrong. They deserve it.
Dwayne, let's end the call where we both 100% agree, my friend, and I appreciate your call, sir. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. I think we're going to, who are we going to next here? Why don't we go to Edward next? Edward calling out of Texas. What's up, Edward? Oh, not Texas. Okay. Edward, what's going on?
Jack Smith got how many felonies on Trump? 91?
Well, there's 91 total counts, not just from the Jack Smith case, but yes, I get what you're saying. Yes, sir.
Is Trump charged with insurrection?
Trump has not been charged with insurrection. However,
thank you, clown.
Okay, so would you like to have a conversation, or are you just going to call me a clown? Okay, another idiot who hangs up the phone, who doesn't want to have a conversation. See what the guy doesn't understand, who just called in, because he's not capable of having a debate. The Constitution, the 14th Amendment, doesn't say that you have to be convicted of insurrection in order for the Supreme Court in Colorado to do what they did. But obviously the guy who just called in, not only is he not smart enough to have a debate or conversation, he obviously is ignorant to that fact. So it's probably good he hung up the phone. 702-221-7283, the number to call. But I'm the clown. All right, let's go to Paul. Paul, what's going on, man?
Hey, man.
I'm the clown.
I know. Yeah, and me too. I guess I'm just a radical left libtard, I guess too. But that last caller embodies why we are where we are, right? Like, even if there was evidence, right? He would say, "Oh, that was the Democrats," and then if he's convicted, "Oh, that's not really what he meant. Oh, it's a witch hunt. They're coming after me." That's the whole point of all this. It doesn't matter what happens. He is their messiah of white breathing, and no matter what evidence is presented, it's always going to be them playing the victim.
Right.
And I don't know how you fix that, because the reality is, the same people that said that the DOJ is corrupt, the same DOJ went after Hunter Biden. So so what is it? Is it a witch hunt?
You are so right. And you're right. And I'll give you another example. I mean, when people want to talk, the guy just brought up Jack Smith. He thinks Jack Smith is just going after Trump, and he's going after Jack Smith prosecuted John Edwards. I mean, this guy has prosecuted Democrats, so that argument gets thrown right out the window. But then somebody like that will call me a clown and hang up the phone.
Because they don't want to have an intellectual conversation. And this is what I mean by lack of critical thinking, right? All these evangelicals, they will say, Hunter Biden overturned the election, right? Now, they keep saying God, 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 because they're religious freaks. So they're going to say that Joe Biden, who's 80 years old, follow me here, who has dementia for them, overturned the will of God, who created the heavens and the earth and the moon and the stars and human life and animals. Somehow this 80-year-old dementia patient that wears diapers overturned the will of God. I mean, think of how stupid you have to be to believe that.
It's brainwashed beyond belief. Right? It's brainwashed beyond belief. And, I get into debates, Paul, with Republicans all the time when it comes to January 6th, because a lot of MAGA Republicans don't believe that Donald Trump bears any responsibility. Oh, yeah, by the way, it was Kevin McCarthy on the House floor hours after the insurrection that said Trump bears responsibility. But anyway, we'll leave that one alone. Right. But they don't want to know facts. And what I try to tell them is this. I ask them a question, and I say, if Donald Trump didn't say the election was stolen, he didn't say Biden cheated, he didn't say, that it was George Soros or whatever other nonsense he said, does January 6th happen? And if they say, yeah, it still happens, then you can't have a conversation with them. Because that's not the correct answer. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. The answer is obviously no. And if they say no, then you got them in a corner, because they just admitted to you that if not for Donald Trump's own words and lies, January 6th doesn't happen.
So out of all the Republicans that you've had on here that you disagreed with, which is fine, how many of them can name 10 policies as the reason that they support Donald Trump? How many of those callers that you've had over the last year, 2 years, 3 years can give you 10 policies that they could even mention that he's passed?
I hate to say this, because some of the Republicans that I have on this show, I have a lot of respect for, but I would say none. I would say none. Quite frankly, there's a few.
Right.
but I would say none. I've interviewed probably 100 Republicans that are MAGA supporters since Donald Trump took office. I don't think one of them could name 10 policies unless they did a Google search. I just don't think they could. And I could roll off the top of my head 10 policies, that Joe Biden has implemented just in the last couple of years. And I talk about it on this show all the time.
But I think that's the problem, Brian, is that they're not voting for Trump based on what he's done for them. They're voting for him based on their grievance and their victimhood. How somehow some evil radical libtard is coming after them and their freedoms and their rights. And it's all about grievance. I think I'll send it to you. It's called The Conspiracy to End Democracy. It's an incredible book. It was written by a news reporter who's either a Republican or former Republican, but it talks about how it's just this grievance, how he talks about this Nazi Germany stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. And the whole thing is Trump didn't create these people. He just exposed them and told them it was okay to be able to. These people were like this before Trump. And I think a lot of people overlooked it. I think it's a big deal. They were like this before he came in office.
Paul, tell me if you agree. This might be a really weird analogy, but you could tell me if you agree with it or not. Okay. There's a lot of Candace Owens and bigots out there that say, why is there more transgenders now than there were 10 years ago? And my response to her would be because many of these transgenders are more comfortable with being who they are now, and they're afraid of people like you. I would say the same thing about Trump. And here's the analogy. It's not that there are more racists in this country today. It's that they feel more comfortable in their bigotry and their racism thanks to a guy by the name of Donald J. Trump. Does that make sense?
I do. And to support that, how many Republicans were out there, other than Mitt Romney, protesting for Ahmaud Arbery, for George Floyd, or for anybody that was beaten by cops? Just give me a name of anybody. And they don't.
You're right.
Because they don't stand up for social injustice. They only stand up for me, in the Second Amendment.
Well, if you ask some of these Republicans, they would say there's no such thing as systemic racism. I don't know if you heard of this right-wing zealot, Joe Pags. I guess he does some syndicated radio show. I've never listened to his show before, but I was in one of those, a space, they call it, on X, and he was making the claim that black people are treated the same as white people when it comes to law enforcement in this country as a whole, which is obviously a blatantly ignorant statement. But there are people like him and even Larry Elder that says systemic racism doesn't exist. Why have I never heard a Democrat say that? I've never heard a Democrat in my life say systemic racism doesn't exist. Why is it that only the Republicans feel that way? Why is that, Paul?
When did white people allow black people the right to vote in this country? The 1960s?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when was our Constitution written?
Yeah, way before.
Over 200 years, but yeah, they're treated the same. When were women allowed to have credit? When did we bless them with the ability to have credit on their own? The 1920s?
Yeah, isn't it interesting that they want to talk about the Constitution and they want to talk about the Constitution when it comes to gun control and their rights, but they don't want to talk about how women weren't allowed to vote, how black people weren't allowed to vote. When was America great? You MAGAs out there, make America great again. I'm happy that I live in this country. It's the freest country in the world. I wouldn't want to live in any other country. But don't you tell me that America used to be great and it's not great anymore. We have a lot of problems in this country, but we've come a long way. Paul, it's always good to hear from you, my friend.
Well,
I appreciate it. Yep, go ahead.
Let me just say one last thing is,
sure.
America, I look at it as having a kid. I love my child more than anything itself. I can love America and be proud of it. But the problem on the right is that they don't allow themselves to be disappointed in it and point out the flaws, especially when it comes to police. Mm-hmm. They're very selective and they can't criticize it. I can still love the country and be critical of it. Yeah. And they can't do that. And that's what we have to do. We have to be critical. That's the only way that we get better. And go back to your point. That's why LGBTQ and trans kids feel more comfortable, because they'll say, hey, the Democrats are going to accept us for who we are, not for who they want us to be.
Amen, brother. I don't disagree with you one bit. Very well said. Paul, good to hear from you. I appreciate you. Thank you. Number to call, by the way, if you want to join the conversation, 702-221-7283. That's 702-221-SAVE. Agree or disagree. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the Colorado Supreme Court voting 4-3 to take Donald Trump off the ballot. Then we're talking about the future. In the next 6 to 8 weeks, the Supreme Court's going to have to decide if Colorado was right or wrong. How are they going to vote? Joe Walsh was just on the show. He just said he thinks the vote's going to be 9-0 to bring Trump back on the ballot. I don't know if I agree with that. And then we had Grant Stern from Occupy Democrats, who obviously disagree with that as well. Taking your phone calls, 702-221-SAVE, 702-221-7283. We're going to go to Al now, who's next on Pushing the Limits. What's going on, Al?
Hey, Brian, great topic today. After the last caller, you guys hit a lot of ground. I think that I always go with Alan Dershowitz analysis. He feels that it's unconstitutional, that it's really Congress who's supposed to make that decision. And although I personally don't think that Trump, even though I'm not a big Trump supporter, I am a Republican, but I'm not and there's a lot of Republicans who don't support Trump, just for the record.
Right.
Although I'm not a big Trump supporter, I don't think he caused the insurrection. I don't think he caused it or he instigated it. I think he tried to cover himself.
Look, can I ask you, Al? Al, let me challenge you on that for a moment, and I respect your opinion.
Okay, go ahead.
But
go ahead.
Perfect example. If he didn't cause the insurrection, then who did? And I also ask you, if he didn't say the election was stolen, does January 6th happen at all?
Well, the thing is that if that I can't answer if he doesn't say it or not. A lot of people were upset that it got lost.
Wait, but hold on, Al.
Showed up.
But Al.
Okay,
but Al,
no. Insurrectionists. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're telling me that if Donald Trump didn't say the election was stolen, if he conceded like Hillary Clinton did the next day, you're telling me January 6th might still happen? With all due respect, that doesn't make any sense.
No, you're correct. Okay, that's correct. If he doesn't say that the election was stolen, if he would have admitted defeat, that doesn't happen.
Isn't that a cause? But isn't that a cause? You said he didn't cause it.
I don't think that's a cause. No, I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough of a cause to be prosecuted on, because the insurrectionists showed up to the event and they took it upon their own to go and cause an insurrection.
But it's been proved in a courtroom that many of those people admitted that they were there because of Donald Trump. They were there because of the words of Donald Trump.
But they didn't go to cause an insurrection because of what Donald Trump said.
What do you mean? They tried to
go cause an insurrection.
They tried to overturn the outcome of a free and fair election because Donald Trump said the election was stolen. Isn't that a cause?
Yeah, but I don't think that's no, I don't think that. I don't think that's a cause.
Okay,
I disagree with that. I just don't. That's where we disagree. I don't think that's enough. It's like right now I'm going to be going to a party, not a party, a public event, and if it turns into an insurrection, I'm not going to sue the city.
Let me take it a step further. Okay, we obviously agree. We obviously disagree on that, I should say. But with that being said, what about his behavior after the insurrection started? After there was violence, he knew that they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Police officers were getting assaulted. A woman was shot. She eventually died. And Donald Trump, during the insurrection, it's proven, said Mike Pence needs to do the right thing. During the insurrection, for 4 hours, Donald Trump refused to do anything. He didn't put out any statement on social media or any videos or anything along those lines. What do you make of that?
Okay, I don't know how old you were during the Rodney King event, but for the days Rodney King didn't come out and people were asking Rodney King to come and say something, and it wasn't until Rodney King came out and said, "Hey, let's all stop this. Let's all get along."
How could you compare that?
Slow down.
First of all,
you can't.
Okay, so hold on.
It's the same thing. Is Rodney King responsible for that?
First of all, the violence. Okay, so first of all, Rodney King was in the ICU and he almost died. He was almost beaten to death. So that's number one. Donald Trump wasn't beaten. He wasn't in the hospital. Number two, I understand that the LA riots were terrible. It was a horrible response to what took place to Rodney King. But to compare Rodney King to the sitting president of the United States, I think is a very false analogy.
Well, I think, now I hear you, and I respect your opinions. I'm just going on the premise that you said that Donald Trump could have stopped it earlier, and he probably could have. I agree with you on that.
I didn't even say necessarily. I won't even go that far. I won't even say he could have stopped it. What he absolutely should have done is denounced it. And he didn't do it for 4 hours. And you know what that leads me to believe, Al? He wanted it to happen. He was enjoying it in the White House. He wanted that to happen.
I think I agree with that statement. But just because you're enjoying it doesn't mean you instigated
When
it.
you're the president
And, you know,
of the
and-
United, when you're the sitting president of the United
I hear you.
States, it's your
I hear you.
job to do what Donald Trump didn't do. And that's why I believe
That's a possibility.
that's all I'm saying, Al. Now listen,
No,
Donald Trump
I
is
agree.
Donald
I
Trump,
agree with you on that.
Donald Trump
I
is
agree on that.
You're going to listen to, right-wing conservatives on the air today, and they're going to say how bad the Colorado Supreme Court is, and it's all the liberals and it's all the Democrats. But you know what they won't do, which at least you have done in this conversation? No conservative today who does a radio show is going to put any responsibility on Donald Trump and what took place on January 6th. And to me, that's despicable. We can disagree a little bit, but at least you're willing to admit that Donald Trump has to bear some responsibility with his behavior that day and the lies. Conservative radio shows will wear the Donald Trump knee pads all day, and I've had it with them. I really have.
Yeah, well, I totally get that. That's why I support the show and I call in.
Yes.
But I'm going to be honest. I've always stuck to my points and given you my honest opinion.
Yes, and
I think Trump could have handled it better, but I don't think that there's enough evidence for him to be prosecuted. However, I will say this.
Yeah.
I will say this regarding prosecution. I'm just doing my homework because I usually try to do my homework.
I understand, Al, and
He was prosecuted. No, I want to say, if you go read Colorado, he was prosecuted, and that's why the judges supported that.
Al, I
that
appreciate
judgment. And so they,
I always appreciate it when you call in, whether we disagree or not, and we can have a civil conversation. I do appreciate that. Al, thank you for calling in.
Not a problem.
Appreciate
not a problem.
you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Let's go to Victor, who's next. What's up, Victor?
Hey, Brian, so based on your logic, should Kamala Harris and Obama should they be prosecuted for inciting riots?
Okay, so give me a statement or a lie or a quote. Hold on, you got to let me finish my... Hey, sir, you just asked me a question. Now I'm going to ask you something because I can't answer your question unless you give me a direct quote. Give me a direct quote that Barack Obama said that you think incited a riot. Go.
Never said anything. You never told.
Okay, so then what the hell? Then what?
Black Lives Matter to stop.
Then what are you talking about? Okay, so what are you?
When did he tell them to stop?
Okay,
give me a quote that.
So
he said,
first of all, are you not smart enough to understand that the overwhelming majority of the Black Lives Matter protests were under Donald Trump, not Barack Obama? That's number one. Number two, Barack Obama did say that he didn't want violence on the streets, and it wasn't. He did it constantly. So you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
And how about Kamala Harris saying they're not going to stop?
Okay, so now that we've made it clear that you don't know what you're talking about with Barack Obama, because constantly he spoke out against violence, so you're wrong about that. Now give me, and you didn't give me any direct quote with Obama. I can give you quotes of Donald Trump. Now give me a quote that Kamala Harris said. By the way, Kamala Harris also denounced any violence that takes place at any event. It could be Black Lives Matter or January 6th. So now tell me what Kamala Harris said that incited.
It's just so your solution to this whole.
So you're not going to answer my question.
Right now.
You're not going to answer my question.
No, I just gave you a direct quote from Kamala Harris.
And what is it? Go ahead. Repeat it.
You're not taking it.
Repeat it. Go ahead.
And they're not going to stop. They shouldn't stop.
Okay. So you're saying not calling for violence, but saying they shouldn't stop when it comes to your First Amendment rights.
Well, that was the question that she got. She got the question. It was a direct question.
So do you have any idea
about this? She says, no, they're not.
Do you have any idea what you're talking about? She was referring to having the right to peacefully protest. You don't know what you're talking about. It's a false analogy.
Well, that's the thing.
You don't know what you're talking about. We can disagree, but
you pick and choose.
No, I don't. Pot him down. No, I don't. You have said that Obama and Harris incited. Do you not understand that in order to incite something, you have to rev it up in order to help make something happen? And then all of a sudden you move the goalpost and now you're saying, well, when the riots did happen, they didn't say this to denounce it. Do you even know what incitement is? Do you even know what you're talking about? Do you know what the definition of incitement is? Barack Obama constantly denounced violence. Kamala Harris has constantly denounced violence. And you're trying to compare that to Donald Trump saying the election was stolen? What the hell is wrong with you?
It's all how you listen to it. You choose to.
All right. Well, guess what? I'm going to choose not to.
Guess what? Telling you to
I'm going to choose not to listen to you now because you don't make any sense at all, and you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. You want to talk about a false analogy, but Obama didn't denounce the Black Lives Matter protest. First of all, yes, he did. The violence he did. You have no idea what you're talking about. 702-221-7283 is the number to call if you'd like to be a part of the conversation. Let's go to Ahmed. Ahmed is next on Push the Limits. What's up?
Good afternoon, brother. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, my friend. What's on your mind?
Thank you so much for everything that you have been doing to save democracy. I have two questions for you.
Sure.
And because I would like to know what's your opinion. Comes 2024, do you think January 6th will be in every voter mind when they go to the booth and choose their candidate?
That's a good
question.
Let me ask that one first, if that's okay.
Let me ask a second question.
Okay.
So,
All right, go
so you
ahead.
can talk.
Okay.
Second question. I hear the Democratic Party say that if Trump get reelected, the institution will not held and all that stuff. He will end democracy, etc.
Mm-hmm.
If Trump is that threat, they have the Senate, Congress, they have the presidency now.
Mm-hmm.
Why they haven't done anything or passed any laws to protect us from Donald Trump? In my opinion, I feel Trump will not be a threat if he get reelected. I don't want him because I'll be voting for Biden.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Biden. I think we have a strong judiciary system in America. They protect us in 2020 when he tried to overturn the election. Even his extreme Supreme Court, the justice did not even heard his argument. That's my question. Why they haven't passed anything to protect democracy if Trump is a threat?
Sure. So let me answer your first question, which was about, people going to the voting booth if they're going to be thinking about January 6th. Let me be very clear on this. If you're a MAGA supporter, Donald Trump said it himself, I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they'll still vote for me.
I'm talking about the independent.
I know.
Like
I know. I'm answering your question. I know. But I got to go around circle here. There's going to be people on the left that, of course, are going to be thinking about January 6th. I personally believe that a lot of independents, even though some of them might not be happy with Joe Biden for certain reasons, I still think they pick Joe Biden over Donald Trump. I'm one of them. I didn't vote for Joe Biden because I love Joe Biden or I think he was going to, be the best president of all time. I voted for Joe Biden because it was an anti-Donald Trump vote. And I still believe that there are a lot of people out there that will do that. Now, your second question. Well, Donald Trump is facing 91 felony counts. I think people are trying to do whatever they can to hold him to account. This is a man who has never been held to account for anything he's done ever in his life. He was found civilly liable for rape. So I do believe that there are people out there that are saying we need to hold him accountable for the things he's done in his life. Not necessarily because we don't want him to be president, we don't want him on the ballot, but because breaking the law is breaking the law.
The Democratic Party, let's not bring Trump here. I wanted to know why Democrats have not done anything to protect us from Trump if he is a threat. Because they elected Biden and gave Democrats everything is to protect the United States of America. Have they failed? If it's like Trump is a threat, I think they have failed. And why?
I don't think so you're saying if
they cannot
you're saying if Donald Trump wins in 2024, which by the way I still don't believe he does, but you're saying if he does, do you blame Democrats for that? I'm going to tell you who I blame.
No. You're not understand. They are saying he will end the system in democracy. We will not have another election again. Okay, why have they not passed anything to protect us?
Well, what do you mean? Be specific. What can they possibly do? I mean, what can a Democrat possibly do to protect us against Trump besides trying to win an election?
Voting rights?
Well, I mean, I think
so he cannot. overturn elections.
Well, he didn't. Well, I can tell you this: we had the January 6th
So
commission.
he's not a threat to democracy, right?
I believe if he wins re-election, he absolutely is.
And we will have election in 2028, right?
We're going to have an election, but I'm not so sure.
Okay.
Donald Trump is the kind of guy that never wants to leave the White House. I believe he is an absolute threat to democracy. You look at the fake.
Why they haven't passed anything?
They are. They are. But sir, they
forever.
are. They have prosecuted people across the country, including 6 Republicans in Nevada.
So he will not stay.
They were
White House
They were
forever.
part of a fake electorate scheme. They are prosecuting these people.
No, let's not talk about. I'm talking about Trump.
And
So
I'm
he will not
talking
stay
about Trump
forever.
too. This was at the hands of Donald Trump, who was a part of a fake electorate scheme, part of his felonies that he is alleged to have been committed. And what I'm telling you is the cronies around him are being indicted. 6 of them were indicted in Nevada. So I disagree with you. I think holding people to account based on the law is holding Donald Trump to account, Ahmed. And I do appreciate your call, as always, sir. And you're welcome to call back anytime. I appreciate you. Thank you. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Again, 702-221-SAVE. Let's go to Julie, who's next on Pushing the Limits. Hello, Julie.
Hi, Brian. How you doing today?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
I'm your number one fan. I was listening to you that the Democratic Party has never incited violence. I disagree with you, Brian.
I never said that.
Okay, and for many reasons, in 2018, you remember the Democratic Republican Ted Lieu of California that he said on MSNBC that John fired Mueller, there was going to be widespread civil unrest. Okay,
so I don't think that's inciting violence when you make a statement like that.
That's inciting violence.
No, it's not.
And
no,
you remember the same year.
What?
Let me finish.
But what you just said is not true.
Cory Booker urged people to answer a call to action to protest at the Capitol. And I'm going to ask you this. Do you remember Bill Ayers in 1975 when he bombed?
You've said a lot of things that make no sense. So I want to respond, and then I'm going to keep you on the line. Julie, I'm going to keep you on the line, but I need to respond to some of the things you just said. How can you, with a straight face, say that if Cory Booker says a call to action to peacefully protest is inciting violence? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. What are you talking about?
Peacefully protest by burning federal buildings and destroying police.
Cory Booker, okay, let me explain to you. Okay, you're conflating the two. Cory Booker never said, in fact, he denounced any form of violence. When you say peacefully protest, that doesn't mean you want people to burn down buildings. Yes, he did. He's been interviewed. You are not educated on this issue. You are wrong.
I am very
Cory
educated.
Booker never told anybody to burn down buildings. What are you talking about?
It's on video. It's on video.
So you're saying Cory Booker told people to burn down buildings? Is that what you're saying?
Do you think that? Hold on. Do you think that saying fight is inciting to violence?
I'm sorry. What was the question? I'm mesmerized by what you think is inciting violence.
Okay. If saying fight, it means violence?
Saying that you want to protest is not inciting violence.
Answer me that question. Saying fight, it means violence?
There are different ways of, okay, I'm going to answer your question. When somebody says we need to fight like hell for our principles, that doesn't mean violence. Okay. When somebody says, I'm going to fight for my family, that's not what we're talking about when it comes to Donald Trump. We are talking about the big lie. I'm going to explain it to you if you will listen to me. If Donald Trump said we need to fight for our country, that wouldn't be why he would be facing felony counts. What Donald Trump did was he lied about the 2020 election. He said that it was stolen. He said Biden stole it. He said the Democrats stole it. That's why Donald Trump is January 6th happened.
I witnessed election fraud here in Miami.
Okay, so now you're saying Donald Trump won the 2020 election because you witnessed fraud? Is that what you're trying to tell me now, Julie?
Not only here, Los Angeles, Colorado, DC has removed, ineligible voters. You might know this. You know it. So that means that people that were ineligible to vote voted on the 2020 election.
Julie, hey, Julie.
Election fraud.
Julie.
That's election fraud.
Julie.
And also,
Julie, let me ask you a question.
Julie,
let me ask you a question. Julie, let me ask you a question. Do you believe there was widespread voter fraud that could have overturned the outcome of the 2000?
Absolutely.
Okay, well then you have no idea what you're talking about because you believe the Earth is flat. I'm sorry, with all due respect.
Not that I believe.
There is no
pot her down. Pot her
down. I'm potting you down because you're going to talk over me, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. There is zero evidence of widespread voter fraud that could have changed the outcome of the election. It is not my fault that you are so uneducated that you can't spell the word fact. Just because you might have allegedly, you claim you witnessed some fraud, doesn't mean that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. It has been proven, and there is no evidence. And guess what? Donald Trump's own attorneys had the opportunity to present evidence, and it was shot down. In 14 of those 61 cases, the judge allowed his attorneys to provide evidence. They provided no evidence of widespread voter fraud. So when you say there was widespread voter fraud and Donald Trump won, it's like me saying the sky is pink. It's like me saying that the earth is flat. Now, you can say that, but you're wrong and you don't know what you're talking about. I'm happy to have conversations with people that disagree with me, but this is not an opinion. It's a fact. Joe Biden won a free and fair election. There's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. And the reason why January 6th happened was because Donald Trump spewed the same nonsense that people like you believe. That's why, Julie.
You are incorrect. People here in Miami organize their own group. Nothing to do with Donald Trump.
So
nothing to do.
Who cares if somebody organized their own group? What does that have to do with anything?
I was going to be in the Capitol, but I couldn't. But I was going to protest peacefully.
Julie, John has a question for you on social media. Do you believe we ever went to the moon?
Of course, yes.
Okay, so you do believe that.
Moon.
Okay. Do you believe the Sandy Hook school shooting happened? Yes or no?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you believe the Holocaust happened?
Absolutely.
You do. Okay, I'm happy to hear you say that. But Donald Trump won the 2020 election.
Okay, let's move on to the blaming of Trump on the Capitol protection. Do you remember when the Capitol police chief blamed the FBI for the failures to protect the Capitol because they denied to prepare for the day of
So now you don't want to put any blame on Donald Trump, but you want to put it on law enforcement now. Is that the game you're trying to play?
Who is in charge of the security at the Capitol?
Is that the game?
Is the chief of police?
Okay, but you want to put the blame on Capitol Police and not Donald Trump. How about putting the blame? How about putting the blame on the MAGA morons that stormed the Capitol?
Let me ask you. When did you listen to Trump saying, "Go and attack the men in blue"?
Okay, so let me explain. Let me explain how this works. You don't have to say storm the Capitol and attack police in order to incite violence or an insurrection. Donald Trump is the one who lies, and people like you believe it. So I'm going to say this in the nicest way I can, Julie, because you seem like a nice lady, but I'm going to say this in the nicest way I can. The reason why, one of the reasons why January 6th happened is not just because of Donald Trump. It's because there are a contingent of people in this country like you who believe everything Donald Trump says. And if we actually had people who believed in facts, not fiction, not only does January 6th not happen, but Donald Trump wouldn't even be close to being the front runner within the Republican Party. People like you believe nonsense instead of looking at actual facts. And that's the problem, Julie. I hate to say it, but that's the problem.
I disagree with you. I disagree with you.
I know you disagree with me. That's fine.
Because in the past, we have had election fraud. So why, if we
all right,
question
so
the election...
pot her down. Another question. Quote, election fraud. Julie, can you name me a presidential election in our lifetime where there was enough fraud to overturn the outcome of an election? Go.
Well, Gore and Bush.
What? What are you talking about?
No. Don't you remember what happened during Bush administration?
I do, and it was a very, very close. There was a very, very close election, and George W. Bush ended up winning. There are people that feel like Gore might have won because it was within literally 1,000 votes, Julie. How the hell can you compare that to what took place here?
They review it. So why we are not allowed to review the
There was no evidence that there was.
Why we are not allowed to question
you just
the
made the statement, Julie.
country?
Pot her down again. I'm sorry, Julie. You just made the statement that voter fraud in the past, there's a history of it. And I just asked you, can you name me one presidential election, or heck, one prominent election in my lifetime where there was widespread voter fraud that would have changed the outcome of the result? And the only thing you said was Bush versus Gore. Ridiculous. That was a very close election. Al Gore eventually conceded, something that the orange turd who you support will never do till to his death, by the way, admit that he lost the 2020 election. There has been no evidence of widespread voter fraud in 2020, and there has been no evidence of widespread voter fraud in my lifetime that could have overturned the outcome of an election. Now, I can't help it if there are people like you out there that believe everything that Donald Trump says. A snake oil salesman that lied 30,000 times when he was president of the United States, and you still buy into it and you still believe it. You probably believe Alex Jones, and you probably believe other conspiracy theories out there too. I can't help you, Julie, if you don't believe in actual facts. I'm sorry, I can't help you.
What I watch. You are assuming what people watch, Brian. You need to stop doing that. You are always generalizing Trump supporters.
Yes, I am, and I'm going to generalize, generalize Trump supporters right now. Not all of them, but people like you. And here's how I'm going to generalize. If you are a Trump, notice I'm not saying all Trump supporters. If you are a Donald Trump supporter that believes that Donald Trump won the 2020 election, then it's either one of two things, maybe one of three things. Either you're completely brainwashed, and that goes into the intelligence factor. Maybe you're not extremely educated and intelligent, or you know that Donald Trump lost, just like Donald Trump does, but you're a liar and you're refusing to admit that he lost. It's literally one or the other, and you're damn right I'm going to generalize. Julie, I got to go, but I appreciate your phone call. But you're not the only one. I'm not trying to single you out. There are a lot of people out there that have your views, that the 2020 election was stolen. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's not factually based at all. You're wrong. And what did she just say?
I disagree with you. You disagree with me.
Okay, let her go. I don't want her back on the show. You can call me names if you'd like. And I think you use the same term. I'm not surprised you use that term, because that's the same term that Donald Trump used when he said grab them by the you-know-what. So I'm not shocked that you use that term as well. I've had you on the phone now for almost 10 minutes, and I want 10 minutes of my life back. Thank you for the call, Julie. I appreciate it. But I don't entertain conspiracy theorist people on this show, and I never will. All right, everybody. It's been a fun time. We're going to continue the conversation on the other side, and we're going to kind of switch the conversation a little bit, actually a lot. But I want to start by saying I appreciate everybody from the Occupy Democrats Network for being a part of the show. You can add me on all the social media, which is YouTube at PTL Radio Show. You can also find me on Twitter, where I'm very interactive with the callers at PTL Radio Show. And you can look at my stuff. I'm also on TikTok, by the way. So we're broadcasting live on TikTok right now. All right, coming up next, a guy by the name of Norman Taz is a poker commentator for ESPN. Norm's a good guy, so we're going to kind of get his side of things next. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Pushing the Limits right here